Hello, and today I'm going to talk about typical fantasy tropes, particularly the armor design and what they get inaccurate and some bits that are looked over in the design of the armor and the costume design. There is quite a few tropes and traits that are always, designed in a fantasy TV or movie series, and today I'd like to talk about how you can actually improve on creating a more grounded and maybe a little bit more practical armor. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely spot on historically accurate. This is fantasy we're talking about. However, it's good to refer back to how armor was actually done in the day and the reasons behind the certain proportions and different things like that in the armor that was designed in the period. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few designs of armor that were created in the past. I'm going to start off with the one that I hate the most, and that is Gregor Clegane's armor that was designed for his battle. Not battle, his duel with, I think it was the Viper. So what do I hate? It's a strong word, isn't it? But oh yeah, bear in mind that this is going to be quite a long video, so just be prepared for a long talk. And later on, I'm going to basically do some line art and improve on or demonstrate the typical tropes, and then I'll give you a more accurate fantasy style, and that could be more practical. So this is the Gregor Clegane. So what I don't like about this armor mainly it's the color and the materials. So there is almost no color, and it is kind of, he's a bad guy, but you don't need to communicate it so far that he is literally a black big man with a giant sword. It's hilariously typical, and I think as Game of Thrones is such a, I'd say, well-funded and quite large and well-known kind of TV series, they could have maybe put a little bit more effort into creating a bit more of a, I don't know, accurate, or using a little bit more, giving a bit more personality. He is just typically evil, so what don't I like about this? The studs. There's so many studs all across his helmet, of which is made out of leather, and I don't really like this. It's riveted together. I don't understand why it has to be. There's so many rivets when it's made out of leather. Maybe there's these bars that are underneath here that create kind of like a frame, and then they're studded with leather on top, and then he's got this really silly kind of visor that would be completely, you wouldn't be able to use the visor at all. It's just a bit of a hood for his helmet, and then he's got this weird bevel construction that, it offers some protection for the throat. He's got this kind of lip or feather here that is, can protect some parts of his throat, kind of, not really. He's got a giant gap here that can be used. Not too worried about the face is quite well protected, but a sword blow or a poleaxe would go right through this. A poleaxe with a beak could quite easily penetrate through his helmet. If it's made of boiled leather, then nah, he's got no hope. He would die quite quickly. He's got the typical giant pauldron thing that every fantasy movie has, and it's all made of one piece. No lames to allow flexibility of the shoulder, and it's got that typical Space Marine look that I despise. It's done too much. So he's got this gorget here that is strangely, going over the top. It doesn't have to be that large. His cuirass should cover that part of his body. And it's made of these. Oops. I think I don't need that. Right, back to this. He's got the construction of the armor itself is plates of steel riveted to a backing that is maybe made out of leather, but the plates don't overlap, and these created tiny gaps that could easily be accessed, and rendering the armor pretty much it's just folly, really. So moving on, his cuirass has got no doming structure. It's basically a coat of plates without the coat. It's basically iron plates that do not overlap, creating tiny gaps. Yes, it allows movement, but all these rivets, so many rivets. I guess they're kind of necessary, but he's not wearing anything over the top of this. And he's got this strange skirt of maybe made out of leather. Looks to me like it's made out of leather, which are joined together by these rings. Now any spear will go straight through this, so maybe it can deflect some cuts. I can tell that underneath he's got a gambeson material, so that can absorb some of the blow. However, this typical use of so much leather, you don't need to use it. I do like the fact that he's got a mail hauberk, so the use of chainmail here is been I like that. I do see a gap here that can be easily accessed. I can tell that the mail itself is butted, so yeah, I don't like his sword. The cross card is too thick. Yeah, he is a giant man. However, yes, you can use a giant sword, but the proportions of the sword, it doesn't need to be so thick. Again, this is another fantasy thing, not getting the proportions of swords correct. These quillons are way too thick. They don't need to be that thick. And the typical leather bracers with some strips of like splinter kind of steel over the top. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this. And he's got these, oh yeah, of course he's got these boots that are laced together, poorly constructed, black leather gloves, so he's got no protection on his hands. And no surprise that in the fight he gets his back of his legs are slit by a what I think it was like a glaive kind of weapon. So moving on to some of my childhood kind of designs that I love, but look into it a little further and you'll see the flaws, such as the fact that all these lames are riveted together, however allowing no flexibility because the lames are actually attached to the main pauldron area, so you can't actually flex the your shoulder, and it creates a giant gap here. So Lord of the Rings spent a lot of time on their mail. I do like that. I think they were all made out of plastic, however they constructed it in a way that it looks quite accurate, especially for the extras. The cuirass is okay. Not enough room for your arms, and the dome, there is a dome kind of construction, however there should be more room for the neck movement. No covering of mail for the throat down here as well. I should imagine the helmet is kind of a conical barbute helmet. That I'd probably describe it as that, with the nasal guard, kind of inspired on the Greek Corinthian design. I do like the fact that they have shields. However, I think I've got an image here of the whole cuirass. Yeah, so the cuirass poorly the proportions are poorly made. So it's got this weird plate here that's attached at the bottom of the breastplate. I'm not a huge fan of that because that actually gives you less movement, and the typical fantasy tassets that hang on the side instead of on the front of the thighs, creating this large hole here. Yes, that's for a gap for the being on a horse. However, you don't need to have tassets that are on the side of your hip. You'd rather have them on the front of your thigh. So moving on, I might skip a couple of these so I can just move on to doing analyze some historical armors and then go on to my line work. So yeah, moving on. This is from Excalibur. Not too bad. However, the material is made of quite clearly made of aluminium, and the proportions again, the cuirass is too thick, too long, and not domed enough. Tassets aren't too bad. He's got mail covering here. The greaves are too thick and too wide. They need to go in and actually pretty much be the same proportions of your calf muscles in order, to pretty much hug the curvature of your lower leg, so it allows weight distribution. The gauntlets are too thick here. Everything's pretty much too thick, and I guess you have some sort of movement, but I'm not a great fan of this. Again, this is the same example here. Notice the typical fantasy trope of a guy with long black hair, beard. You'll see that a lot. Okay, long hair, beard. Long hair, beard. He has a beard, but he doesn't have long hair. Long hair. He's got, I guess, some stubble, and well, this guy looks like more of an elf, to be honest. Such poorly made armor here. It's not the pauldron here isn't even actually attached to his arm. Just noticed, and the typical band brace. You'll see this a lot. Band brace. This one made out of leather. I have to be honest. This one actually, from an artist's perspective, I can tell that there's been a great deal of effort into actually crafting the design of the kind of Dracula style armor. However, again, large pauldron that's made of one giant piece. You're not wearing a helmet. Leather band brace. Leather band brace. I do like this brigandine. I like that construction. However, I'm not too sure whether the plates actually overlap. Another example of just a band brace without a quarter. Quarter, it protects the elbow here. This rear brace here, way too thick and large. He's got thick and large pauldrons. Again, that Space Marine look that I don't. That is very typical. This is a bit of a different case here. No helmets for both of them, and I'm not too. The style of pauldron here is all right, but this is from King Arthur, so we're talking mid to late 5th century maybe. I like the use of mail here. You can tell that it's riveted. I am not a fan of this weird square plating armor that okay maybe against a cut, maybe, but not against thrusts. Yeah, strange construction of the pauldron. I actually don't mind it. However, if it was talking about maybe 14th, 15th century, that would be a better. And this silly use of the back scabbard. Swords on the back is not a thing. You cannot draw a sword from the back, especially when you're talking about a long sword. So yeah, let's move on and look at some historical armors and armor designs. Okay, let's close that folder. So historical. So I've just collected a few different images from the mid to late 15th century. So let's just get my pen out and create a new layer. Top left is Tobias Capwell's armor that he made. Actually, no, he didn't make it, but he had it ordered to be made, and it's based on several different. I think it's an effigy. However, he had the armor to be blued or blackened, and I really like this design, and you can really tell that it's really well constructed because it's based off real effigies. So notice that he has kind of, it goes in, the cuirass goes in, it's got this nice dome shape, got a placard, and you've got the breastplate itself, and then you've got a skirt of plates, allow movement of the torso. A lot of fantasy styled armors completely skip this, don't do it at all. And then he's got these tassets here in front of the body, and covers the gap in between the skirt plates and the creases here. I nicked this from Pinterest. I'm not too sure on the background, but however, I did like the construction. Again, quite accurate. Again, based on probably an effigy or actual first-hand reference. So the maybe on a find of a breastplate itself. It's got the dome shape, cuts off in the navel, which is kind of the mid part in between the ribcage and the hip, and then he's got his skirt plates here. Also, the use of clothing and garment. I'm not too sure on what the actual technical name for this garment would be, but it looks quite Italian to me, maybe French. Especially this symbol here screams French to me. I also notice on Tobias Capwell's armor that the construction of the greaves would be to the millimeter of his actual calf muscle and his lower leg, and that allows the distribution of weight and gives great comfort in actual wearing of the armor. You know, armor's meant to be tailored towards your body, and it's not meant to disrupt any movement at all. It's one of those fantasy tropes that armor is heavy and inflexible, but no, it's not. It's meant to be light and very flexible. So notice here with the pauldrons, and this is a Milanese armor. I think this is in Glasgow, the actual armor, but it's in Milanese, so Italian styled from the mid to late 15th century. I think it's probably about 1470 maybe. Notice that on his right pauldron, he has lames here that allow flexibility of the shoulder, a lame here, and then obviously it cuts off here. On his left pauldron, it is one large giant pauldron, however is shaped towards the body. I think he might have a lame here, a couple of lames here on top, just to allow movement of that body, but in this context he would be on horseback, and that side is much more vulnerable to attack, especially from a lance blow, which can be devastating if you get hit in the armpit. So that area needs to be completely covered almost, and that's why his left quarter is quite large. It's just like a reinforcement. Helmets, again, completely left out in a lot of fantasy TVs and movies. You do see them occasionally, so like Lord of the Rings, you see helmets, the appearance of helmets quite a lot. Game of Thrones, all the extras have helmets, but completely left out for the main characters. I despise that idea of leaving helmets out for main characters just so that you can see their face and see their acting. That doesn't need to be a thing. You can act with a helmet on quite easily. And it gives a sense of realism, which I like. Realism in fantasy. I'd say practicality. If you're going to be charging into a battle, you need your head protection. So this armor here is it's near Tring it's from I think it's from a little village just outside of Tring in Hertfordshire, England. This guy died in the Battle of Tewkesbury in 1471. So the armor here that was created around the probably late 1470s. This effigy had to be constructed. So the mason actually constructed the armor in the period. So this is second-hand reference, and if I used this in my artwork, this would end up being third-hand reference. But it is, if I'm true to the actual armor itself, then it can be quite accurate. Also, notice clothing, lots of color. Look at all that color, lots of reds, greens, blues. Also notice how the clothing is constructed. It's not baggy, it's not sagging, it's actually in the day it would have been tailored towards the body. Also notice that the turn shoes have no heel. Heels are a 19th century thing, and didn't really appear until probably Tudor period, which was mid to late 16th century, and that's only really from nobility. Heels are a later thing, and not medieval. And so notice that the hose is actually laced to the garment top itself, and also that the garment has that typical kind of hourglass shape. So it cuts in at the navel, above the hip. These are good examples of that, and good examples of how the garments are actually laced to each other. So it's just those little things that you need to keep in mind when you're designing a costume or stuff that's underneath the armor. So your arming doublets, your gambesons, typical clothing that's worn underneath the armor. So yes, quite a lot to take in, I should imagine, for artists. It's one of those things you need to learn if you're designing armor in the fantasy genre, and you have a client that says, "Oh, I want you to design me a knight or a paladin," that typical thing that is in fantasy kind of genre. You need to look at your references, really ground and really research your designs, so that it can be practical. There's reasons why a lot of these armors were designed in particular ways, their shapes and their proportions. So it's good to actually see how it was done in the day, and then you can take that and not necessarily stylize it, but just be informed of how armor was created. So yes, that's a little bit of images and references that you can take in. So, oh no, not yet. Where's the fantasy one? Here it is. Okay, so I've done some line work. I did this yesterday, and if I zoom in, the left-hand side is the typical fantasy style trope, all the tropes that you get in a lot of TVs and movies. Historically based quotations, historically based kind of movie, and they allow the costume department to get away with a lot of inaccuracies. This is just because they're not informed enough on, or they just don't know, how it was done in the day. So if you were talking 15th century based kind of TV series. Maybe Game of Thrones will come into this. So yeah, moving on. So this is stuff that would be worn maybe underneath the armor. I see a lot of gambeson being used in nowadays, which is nice. However, no use of how the armor would be attached to the gambeson. Male team seems to be left out quite a lot. Let's get my pen out. Okay. Typical long hair and beard, because in battle you need to have that L'Oreal look. You must be worth it. So the buckle thing, there's a lot of TV series and movies doing the typical buckles must be everywhere, and large belt buckles, studs, you know, just there for the hell of it. You know, these buckles are a modern take on buckles, and you really do need to check out and see how buckles were constructed in the past, and just see what there's plenty of, you know, historical finds of buckles. It's just one of those little things that could just a bit more research would go a long way. So yeah, typical. You obviously can't tell here, but I would say, you know, the typical leather trousers thing. More than 2 belts for some particular reason. Wellies, he's wearing wellies, or boots that have buckles on them. I've seen this in the past, and it's either the belt buckles on the boots, or it's laced, you know, from the bottom. To be honest, my footwear from the mid to late 15th century, I don't know a hell of a lot, but I definitely know that they wouldn't have had heels. The ends wouldn't be rounded off, and things like that. I see this a lot, you know, in TV series and stuff like that. The shape of the gambeson, there's no tailoring, quite baggy, and you know, if this was belted, all the buckles were fastened, you know, it would still be quite baggy and not really be tailored towards the body. And again, another thing, that weird lacing on the I see this in a lot of reproduction gambesons, weird lacing on the attachment for the sleeves to the gambeson. I don't really understand it. I don't know whether it's really a historical thing or not. I doubt it very much. And again, the typical rivets that go through the lace that are made of metal, these are called grommets. That's quite a modern thing. Holes that are created in gambesons to allow lace to come through would be reinforced with thread. It takes quite a long time to do those. So yes, moving on to more historically based clothing. I uploaded this to the 15th century European Armour group on Facebook, and I got some great feedback on what I have done here. They noticed that yeah, it's okay, however there could be some improvements. I'm just gonna get my pen here. You know, the shape of the gambeson, or this clothing piece, yeah, the nice shape to it. You've got the arming lacing points, and moving down here, no heels, which is a great thing. That's not really a that's more of a Bond thing, the heels. So using turn shoes, and using reference for turn shoes that usually are made out of leather. The hose are quite close to the leg, so they're tailored towards the leg. Similar, they wouldn't be called tights, but they would be quite tight and more of a kind of slim fit production. Hats are a thing in fantasy, not fantasy, historical evidence. There's so much evidence, paintings, effigies, murals and frescoes of people wearing hats, and that I see that left out a hell of a lot for males in fantasy styled TV series. Completely left out. They have to have their hair down, or no headwear at all. I don't really understand why. So yeah, I uploaded this to the oh yeah, notice that also I've done buttons instead of buckles. You got two different instructions. You can button up or you can lace up in historic, kind of 15th century. Buckles tend to be used for fittings, like belts and stuff like that, so yeah, the feedback that I got, I just lose version 1 and this is version 2. Notice that he is wearing, over the top of his arming doublet is called a Gyornir. I think that's how you pronounce it. Or is Gyornir? I'm not too sure on the pronunciation of that, but that is the typical garment used by the Italians, and maybe some French, Swiss, German may have worn this typical garment that's worn over the top. And yeah, I've added a belt here. However, the belt is more of a one loop over the belt kind of construction, instead of not looping over twice, which is that kind of modern take on it, that typical square look. So yeah, let's zoom out. I got rid of his padded arming cap underneath, and yeah, that was pretty much it. So that's more of a historical take on the clothing, more of an Italian style. So let's move on. I'm going to paint over this guy, and let's get rid of this red arrows. I'm going to pause it here just to check that my video upload has recorded properly, and take a quick break so I can drink some water, and then I'll get back to this, and then I'll paint over this guy and do all the weird historical, fantasy style tropes that you see in TV series. So yeah, I'll pause it here. Okay, I'm back, so I'm going to carry on with arming up this fantasy styled person, and designed in typical styled fantasy tropes that you see in TV and movie. No, I don't want to delete the line work. I want to go over the top. I'm just gonna lower the opacity of the line work just so I can see what I'm doing. I'll go for a dark blue. Seems to go nicely with the off grey background that I've got. Go for something like that. I think that should probably do the job. It's gone. Right, here we go. Now, something we see quite a lot is that cuirass that is flat and wide. So I'm just going to paint that on. No room for the neck movement. Apologies, this might be quite a long video. I'll attach some time codes so that people know where to look when I'm going through the whole video. It's going to be quite a long one, I think, well over an hour. So something we see quite a lot is really wide up here where it should be quite narrow, and this doesn't really allow much movement for the arms. and let's go for that flat look that is seen quite a lot on the cuirasses, and let's see, right down to the belt line. They're coming in a little bit there. A little bit of stylization, so maybe it comes up and around here, and then that lip at the bottom we always see. That a little thinner. Okay, so that's a quick sketch up of the cuirass. Let's go for that giant pauldron look that is always seen. It's coming out unnecessarily. Maybe it clips over the side here. Very rough, this, so apologies, it's not neat and tidy. So I'm just going to add some buckles just to attach the pauldrons to the breastplate. Those long, unnecessarily long strips. To be honest, I have this on my when I do my HEMA. I need to cut the leather strip. It's too long. Okay, so let's make that come over the top of the cuirass a little bit. That overly large pauldron look. There's I always see gorgets and stuff like that, but we'll leave that out and just give them a bit of that padded jacket underneath come through. In typical fantasy TV series fashion, this will be covered in mud, as it usually is. I think I've got a brush for that, so I could probably dirt texture, add a bit of mud, because he's been through wars and stuff, and he doesn't have any time to clean his equipment or have anyone do it for him, like squires. Back to my detail brush, and then just get that colour back. Right. So the reason why cuirasses weren't this long is to allow movement of the body. I'll explain that later when I do my other guy. And let's, sometimes mail is used, but we'll leave that out and give him a, you know, that padded kind of leather jacket that they sometimes wear, and make that all wrinkly and baggy. And then we'll add the typical vambrace look that all medieval people apparently had. There we go. Oh, and let's do that metal strip thing that's done. This is a historical thing, but within taste and period. Even leather armor was a thing in historically, but it is very different to what you see in the movies and TV series, and you get original finds and looks on murals and stuff. Coming round. This is going to hinder the movement of your torso, and this is in turn going to struggle to even get on a horse or sit up properly or actually sit in a chair. So that's that Aggie leather jacket, and then we've got those fan braces on the other wrist. Oh, and the buckles. Just zoom in. Make some space for buckles, those square ones we always see. I'm still recording. Yeah, I reckon this is going to go well over an hour. Let's just copy that. And then move it down here. Just collapse the layer. I'm only working on a few layers here. Don't want to make it all messy. Adding some ribs, because there's usually like a lip or a little lip usually in armor, and that's still done in on reproductions. One thing I suppose they do get right. That buckle. Yeah, the leather going inwards. Yeah. See that quite long. A lot is the over hang of leather strips from buckles. I think Lindy Beige explained that in his I think it's a movie called Black Death or something like that with Sean Bean. One of the guys had a cuirass, and the way it was the buckles on the cuirass, the leather strips just overhang way too much. Unnecessary. There we go. No armor there, you don't need that. Not that the elbow and the joint of the elbow is very important. Okay, so for the garment coming over. Do the belt fitting. There, he's got his belt coming around here. Unnecessarily thick belt that's quite modernized. Something we never see historically, this style of buckle. Add that pin. And the folding bit, that's always done. Okay. I mean, this was done historically. The way that the rest of the belt kind of is folded in it like a tie. Let's make it go usually the belt end would have a metal fitting, but we'll miss that because of budget purposes. Okay, and then the rest of the belt here. Let's just erase this. Now, this is how it shouldn't be fastened to the belt, is directly up here, and then let's say that the end of the belt, end of the scabbard finishes there. And then flops down. I usually see them quite floppy. They haven't got the sword in there. In this case, because a lot of main characters just like using swords and no other weapon, maybe a spear if they have to. I don't understand that. Spear and pole arms should be the primary weapon. Let's give them a very normal, undecorated scabbard. There we go. Not made of wood on the inside, just leather. Okay. No belt fittings, just a simple attachment like that. That's not how it should be. And usually you see this where the sword handle comes up to around here. Makes it very hard to draw your weapon. I'll show you later how it should be. And let's do that typical tasset thing that we see quite a lot. So his hip is there. Move it around there. Tassets on the side. Coming out here. We see quite often. I mean, even I'm responsible for doing this in some of my past artworks. We all do it at some point. And let's do that awful looking square shaped pieces of metal that are riveted to each other. Do them quite long. Because this is a historical thing. Apparently. I don't know who came up with this. Cheap option for creating armor. All those gaps. Right, let's just add the rivets. So many rivets. In this case, yes, necessary, but unnecessary because I would prefer to have lamellar armor than this. All the plates are overlapped then. Okay, let's just duplicate that. Ooh. Very rough. Okay, move it. Do my auto select. Just move that in place. Then I'll just take one and duplicate it again. Thin it out so you get the foreshortening correct. Warp it into shape. Use a warp tool. There we go. It's fitting in okay now. Right. Duplicate that and then flip it. I've created a shortcut for flipping. I usually use Alt Control F for that. It's managed to learn to do that out of habit. Okay. Collapse all those layers. I think that this is the main layer. So yeah. Let's just correct the foreshortening. Okay. Very quick. But you get the idea. This is not how you should create armor. Always use reference. As allow room for the line work underneath to come through. Give it a little bit of thickness. And let's imagine he's got some kind of cloak underneath. I see this quite a lot. Just wouldn't say it's unpractical. You know, it's perfectly fine having a cloak or garment underneath here, but it's not exactly based on anything. It's just let's just give it a quick decoration. Circles will do. Actually, you know, fantasy doesn't have decorations much. Let's assume that that's made of leather, because it always is. Okay, that's quite a thick line there. Let's just continue that on the other side here. Outside here, just so I can get the silhouette looking okay. Okay, and then we'll leave armor out for the legs. No need for that. Right, the sword. I'm going to give him a sword here with an unnecessarily long. Let's say he's got a long sword, and then it's got all these weird bars that apparently are decoration. I mean, you do see this historically, but in taste and to a point where you can still hold the sword properly. Let's do giant pommel. Oh, actually, no. I do see quite a lot is pommels that are too small. So let's do this. Not even pinned on. I won't do that. Otherwise, that's too historically accurate. And then lots of strips that are very ununiform, because that's a thing as well. God, that'll be so uncomfortable in the hand. See this in a lot of games, where they just do some random strips of leather and say that that's a handle. Okay. Right, the sword. I'm going to use the line tool for the blade, just so I can get it dead straight. There we go. Nah, that's got a taper on it. I don't want any tapering because that's too historically accurate. There we go. So there's just one giant thick bar like that. I mean, some weapons, maybe in the 13th century, kind of had that shape, but no research put in. Actually, let's do the typical diamond cross section that you always see. Round the tip off a little bit, and then go for the ultra thick quillons. Oh yeah, let's do this thing where they think that all long swords had these spiky languettes, or no, not languettes. I can't remember what they're called. Do you usually see them on the later Zweihanders? There you go. I'm probably exaggerating quite a bit here. You know what I'm going to do, actually? I want to do this. And then duplicate it. Flip it. so we get it symmetrical. Flatten it out, and so I'll just get rid of any line work underneath here. Give it some shape. And a gem, because gems in swords were a thing for battle use. Maybe it's a super sword. Right. I have no idea how you'd sheath that properly. Oh well, it doesn't matter. He's going to be swinging it around anyway. Here we go. Armored swordsman. Oops. Back here. Let's make the line work underneath here. Let's, in fact, what I'm going to do is duplicate this just in case I need to go back, and then group it, and then group the other one. Okay. Bring up the opacity, and let's get rid of the line work underneath. Yeah, so we can see what's going on. Okay. Oh, my bad. And then let's get rid of all this line work underneath here. Hopefully make some corrections. Knocking it down a little bit. There you go, it's similar now. Okay, let's flatten that. And then just fill out the gaps. Get nearly there, and then I'll work on the other guy. What I'll do, I'll pause it and just make sure that everything's recorded properly. And then we'll move on to the third part, which is actually doing a more historical based style of fantasy armor based on 15th century, mid 15th century Italian. So I'm using a bit of context here. Schola Gladiatoria #1 word. Here we go. Fill that in. And I'll just use the polygon tool and just quickly fill that in using the selection. Okay. Got a couple of corrections. Just finish off the bottom part here. Okay, I think we're done now. Ooh. No, we're not. I bet all of you are screaming that the left pauldron. Okay, so let's just finish that off. And that is a very poor rendition of fantasy styled armor. What it shouldn't look like, to be honest. Very impractical. No helmet. Doesn't need one. He's too good for a helmet. There we go. Using many of the typical tropes that you see in, say, Game of Thrones, Summon, Lord of the Rings, and many other fantasy styled movie and TV series. So yeah, I'm going to pause it there and then I'll come back to you. Okay, I'm back. So I missed out just a little bit here where the scabbard's got some line work going over it. I'm just going to erase that. And then let's move this to the side and I'll get cracking on with a more historical style. Okay, move that to the side. I won't colour it in. I don't have the time for that. Maybe one day I will. Alright, let's use this guy here. Let's move him to duplication. Line work. Just naming my folder. I keep my layers on the other monitor in case you're wondering where my layers palette is. Okay, so get rid of all those lines. Right. So we've got our fantasy guy here, and we're going to go for a more historical approach to fantasy style armor. So yes, let's do the same like I did last time and just fade that out. And what brush have I got? Yeah. Let's get another line, another layer, sorry. Right, I'm going to give him a helmet. First off, first thing you want to have is a helmet. So let's go back and see what kind of, I've got a load of reference here that I gathered just to see what kind of stuff I want to do. So this is all the clothing and stuff. I'll use that later. A reference for armor. Okay, here we go. So from different places. So this is Swiss, Italian, and Italian. I'm gonna do the open face bar boot style. Just as a little, you know, you could have a visor. I wouldn't say you would have a visor for that, but usually the bar boot would encompass more of the face and be more of in the Corinthian style. So let's duplicate that and then move it here. Am I mixing up my layers? Yes, I am. Okay. Using reference. Here we go. Let's guess that he's maybe a mercenary, able to afford some armor, encompassing more of the face, coming out. So it's close to the head. Nice taper here. Actually, that's too far up, far down. Sorry. Need to allow movement of the neck for these kind of helmets. The sallet is too big; it can rest on the shoulders. It's just similar to like a great helm. If a great helm's too big, it will rest on the shoulders, and you can't use it. Right. Let's have it going up like here, and we've got a medial ridge, which is the middle part here. Usually comes in. Let's have it scooping in a little bit like the other one does. It has a lip at the bottom here, and something that a lot of, if you do see helmets in kind of history TV programs, they miss out. Sometimes they miss out the vital lining rivets. You see here for the lining. Kind of cradles the head, and this metal's not, the steel metal of the helmet isn't directly against the head. It's suspended in a gambeson like material webbing system. I'm never going to get this rivet right. There we go. Okay, pretty much there now. We've got like an open face bar boot, and okay, we're going to use this cuirass. I'd say most mercenaries may have had a brigandine, but let's say in this case this guy has a little bit more money to spend. Maybe he's quite successful, or a captain of a certain regiment or something like that. So yes, let's start with the cuirass. Nice kind of wasp-like shape. This placard comes in and around like that. Very important to get these proportions right. It clips in and then it goes in and around, allowing more movement for the arm. Extremely important. Can't move your arms properly, you can't rest a lance, do simple guards in using longsword, or simple guards using a poleaxe. He's fighting on foot. Nah, this buckle's completely different, right? That buckle's not right. Let's give him a little bit more of a rounded one. It comes in through there, like that. And you've got 2 rivets, usually 2 rivets just to attach this leather thing. So these 2 bits here are 2 separate parts of the cuirass. And allowing movement for the neck. Again, this cuirass is covering the vital organs. All it needs to do. Everything else covers the rest. Will I use these pauldrons? See what else I have. I might use the quarter. I like that large quarter. So, right, let's put in a stop rib here to stop blades gliding up, or lances. I didn't leave enough room for the. Let's made a mistake. We've got a stop rib here. And then the second one for like a lip, that's the end of the cuirass. Yeah. Like a double defense against blows glancing up to the neck, because that's so vulnerable. Come this way. I'll leave that there, and then I'll cover it with pauldrons in a minute. Right. This skirt of plates is so important, allowing movement of the torso. I will add some belt fittings here. Now it seems that it's overlapping, so I'm just gonna, guessing because of cavalry, underlapping is more of an English style, I think. And for fighting on foot, he has 3 lames. You've got the plate and then 3 lames. Let's just divide that there. So we've got 3 lames, and then there's tassets underneath, over the top. Sorry. Let's just quickly rough out some lames. And these lames will collapse. Yeah, ease for getting on horseback. Just erase that. I'm not happy with these lines here. That's better. Need to practice more. Right, here we go. Last lame. And we've got these tassets that come up and over the top here. Okay. And this last lame usually has these buckles here. A little bit too far over. That's attached around there. Give it some metal thing, ending points for the buckle. Now we do sometimes see square versions of the buckles, but I'm gonna do it. That'll be the other way around, won't it? Trying to think. Actually, you know what, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna zoom in just so I add a little more detail. I've seen this done before, this kind of style. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is super rough, so don't worry too much on the detail. If I was going to do this for a client, I'd end up making another layer and do this all over again. And make the line art super tight. In this case, I'm doing it rough. Erase this. And a rivet here just to point them on. And let's use my lasso tool and just duplicate this onto the other side. Super handy. Alright, here we go. Flip. And just move it here. Okay, that's more or less in place now. And yes, it's fine to directly copy other designs done in the past. They're not copyrighted, so I can use them. And I like that scoop in point here. They're sometimes pointed down at the end of the tassets. In this case, I'm gonna follow what this guy's done. Here, and they come in usually. Otherwise, it's unnecessary amounts of metal used. Oop, use the eraser. I just want to erase it up top here because it seems like it terminates and separates quite close up. Here we go. I like that scooping kind of look. Using reference, very handy. Create new ideas for designs. Quite a large lip there. Not too much. Okay. Do the other one. Seems like there's a lip on each side here as well. So just add those in. And let's just assume that he's got tassets on either side himself as well. So that seems to be done quite a lot historically as the tassets go around the cuirass. So that's the underneath part. Just protecting that gap in between the creases, which is the upper part of the leg and the end of the coat of plates, skirt of plates. And that all in one layer there. Okay, so let's collapse that down again. I give him crease. Yeah, I'll do the whole leg part. He's going to end up having an entire suit of armor, isn't he? Okay. Quite simple. Terminates around the mid part of the thigh. See a lame there, and then I can see that you've got the quarter here. Let's move that up. Again, this is the Milanese style instead of the Gothic style or the English style. Okay. that very typical Italian look. So we usually see lames do that when they're collapsed inwardly. Okay, and then they come up and around here. You know what I'm going to do? I'll add a male skirt because I want to do the whole, all the voiders and stuff, which I haven't done just yet. Made of mail, riveted mail. Okay, there is 2 lames at the bottom, typically. Here. And then we've got the demi-grief, bottom here. That's a bit too long, that's coming down there. And then that very important pin that you see, that pins against the greave, which is the bottom part of the leg. And these, oh no, I'm doing it wrong. We've got the greave coming over and around. Then we've got that medial ridge. We've got 2 buckles holding in place. Usually you can use spring pins. In this case we've got the buckles, and yeah, it will come out just a little bit, but not as extreme as the fantasy version of those buckles. Okay, so that's quite rough, but you'll get the idea. Okay, and then medial ridge for the cuisse. Let's just repeat the same for the other leg. I won't do that lip up there because I'm going to add the male skirt. These would be extremely flexible. You could run around in these and climb walls and do anything that any normal human can do. Yes, you might be a little bit slower, you know, if you're athletically fit, like all these guys are extremely athletically fit. I have no issue running around in this kind of stuff. Of course, eventually, you know, you are carrying 20 to 30 kilos of weight, so eventually you will get tired. There we go. And let's add that pin. Now around, there'd be a strap around the bottom of the demi-greave here. Got to add that in. It's around here. And that loops around the back of the greave, and there's usually like a staple pin or a leather loop that this strap will go around just to further fasten the greave to the cuisse or the demi-greave. Looping round. It seems like it loops back like that. Okay. Very important if you're on horseback. Get a decent set of greaves, and there'll be another strap at the back of the knee here. Usually. And these strips here, just to, there's usually a little bit of bandage just on top of the knee, on the bottom of the kneecap, just to avoid any kind of chafing. And then got a couple of rivets here, let's see. And then these aren't fully enclosed cuisses, because you need the back of your leg to feel the horse. So if he's going to be riding or traveling. Okay, so we've got that. Just take a sip of my drink. Oop, me to do that. I wanted to undo. There we go. Just take a sip of my drink. It's better. Okay, so that's the legs mostly done. I won't add sabotons then. In the Italian style, that it's not hugely major to have sabotons. I'll leave them out in this case. The male skirt, very important because that covers the groin area. Gothic styles usually have like a codpiece that would be made out of mail. So the male, let's have it kind of diagonal formation. This kind of V-shaped thing that you sometimes see. Again, this might not be hugely historically accurate, but the fact that he does have the male and down here. The male skirt. And then let's just do this just to indicate that the end links are made from a different colour. They brass or something like that. You see that quite often. Cool. He's looking quite fancy. And then say he's got a hauberk on. Should I give him a hauberk? Usually the Italians will have the hauberk for full metal shirt. Okay, we'll do that. Let's say he's got a hauberk on underneath here. That would be an extra layer of mail. It would be coming down here. This one's straight in this case. There again, the bottom layer, the links will be a different metal, so brass just for decorative purposes, and let's just add some indication that this is definitely male. Just quickly. That typical C-shaped thing that you see. There we go. On this side, and through here, and on the bottom here. See those links. Now you can speed up this video if you wanted, and then listen to music whilst you watch this happen. I think you can double the speed or something like that, so feel free to do that, and you don't need to listen to me wittering on what I'm doing. Okay, so we've got our hauberk and we've got our male skirt that's attached underneath that will be fastened either with points, or it's fastened usually through the actual mail itself and with a buckle. Okay, so that's most of the body encompassed. We've got the the ever so important pauldrons. So let's see what other reference I've got. So let's get rid of that. I think I've got okay. These are pretty much the same-ish. Yeah, you know what? I will use those pauldrons. If I can go back and bring this back up again. Okay, here we go. So these are Milanese kind of styled on the back. So these are probably, so you've got large pauldrons here, all at one plate, and then in this case you've got one reinforcement plate here, and it's lames, which collapse and allows you to actually move your shoulder properly. So these will come around here. Would that be fastened like that properly? So, I would have thought it goes right over. got this hoop up around here, and then it's like a cut in, and then a scoop in here. Yet to see a very good rendition of Middle Age style pauldrons in any film or documentary. And we got the upper part, which are lames, bands of steel riveted together so you can move properly. And then it comes in here. Comes around like so, and then there's quite shaded here. You've got a band here, like a stop rib, that's riveted to the last lame here. Got those rivets here for the leather, and then we've got a stop rib here to stop it sliding up the neck. And you've got the leather fastening over the top of the brass here. I would think that that goes round the body a little further. Let's go for that. Apologies if I'm getting this majorly wrong, but I'm going to make the pauldron encompass more of the upper part of the shoulder here, just covering that part of the neck. Again, using fantasy history, sorry, to really ground and give a nice historical approach to you. I've added an extra lame here. Let's say it comes down. Could it come in through there? No, that might be a bit too much, I think. It stops there. And then comes around for the other pauldron. And it goes down. The reason why they're asymmetrical is because the right hand side of your body will be more vulnerable to attacks. Sometimes you see these giant things going around here in fantasy style things. The pauldrons shouldn't have that, because if you're going to raise your shoulder, it's just going to go right into your face. Usually they'd be around the front here, like that. Those weird things that you see. Okay, so it's going around. Shoulder there. It terminates around there. And then you've got that very iconic scoop in. That wouldn't do that, it would just do that. Okay, a lot smaller. And then we've got our reinforcing pin here just to attach that plate on. Then we've got all our lames just to allow for the body movement of the shoulder. Now we've got this large quarter here which protects the elbow. I will add that in. Let's just move this image along a little bit. Now usually here there would be male, because the hauberk here is going and covering this area here. So I'm gonna, this area here is going to be completely mailed. There is a pin there, so I'm just going to add one in there just for the sake of it. Yeah, oh yeah, we're going to add our lance rest. Very important. In fact, you know, I'm going to add in the rest itself. It would usually come in like that. Just going to quickly see what our lance rest actually does look like properly. Use some reference. Just going to quickly look it up for lance rest. Sometimes pinned and sometimes screwed on. Okay, so I'm not too far off. I just need to add in more of a curve. Yeah. There we go, that's more like it. Now the inner quarter usually terminates around here. You can see it coming down and out. You don't want to get lanced in anywhere in the arm region. That'd be devastating, getting a lance through your arm. Now it's pinned here because this large quarter is over another quarter, I think. Let me know if I'm pronouncing quarter properly. Only read it instead of actually hearing it. He's got mail coming over here, so that's protecting that part here. There would be steel coming, like an upper van brace called a rear brace that would actually cover this area underneath this mail. So he is protected by steel, and by a voider, and by a gambeson. So there's like nearly 4 layers here protecting this arm. So let's add in the rear van brace here. Would be a gap to allow that movement of the arm. Comes in like so. Should we add the gauntlet? Yeah, let's add the gauntlet. I probably wasted a bit of time just doing all that. Let's make them slightly smaller. So the plate goes around like so. They're actually different on each side. I'm going to add a lame here just to allow a little bit of flex with the wrist, because that's very important. The inner part of the fan brace here, and that would be buckled. Adding in a little buckle there, just enough to fasten it properly. Okay, there will be a stop rib around here, and then the male voider, very important. Very much based on history, this. Then you've got the mitten styled gauntlets. I'm going to add more plates. In this case there's only a few. And then enough of that. And there. And we're almost done. Done most of the body. Going to do the other side. So we've got the male under the male bulwark here, and we've got our quarter fan, which would usually do the V kind of shape, so put that in so it's slightly floating. And we've got our buckle attachment, and there'll be a second one at the end of the wrist here. Very much more protected than the fantasy style one I did. There are versions where there are a lot more lames on these mitten styled gauntlets. Okay, let's just see how long this video is. And it is 36 minutes. God, this is going to go on forever. Okay, so I'm not going to give him a sword. I'm going to give him a poleaxe, because that is what you would have had as your primary weapon. Doing the back edge of the coulter, and then a little strap there, and then we've got the edge here and a little lip, just like a stop rib almost. And let's add in the very important male standard to protect the neck. Underneath you may have had like a boiled leather, hardened, kind of almost like a gorget. It will just go around the neck and it just help protect that area. Right, let's add our poleaxe in. And I'm going to use the line tool. Here we go. Probably quite a bit big for a poleaxe. I'm just going to do that. Here we go, that's a little better. Let's just collapse that in. The other layer as well. Oh, there's those arrows. Actually, I'll delete that layer. Okay. Now the bottom part of the poleaxe, which is technically called the cue, like a snooker cue. Add in a little bit of decoration. That would have a spike on the end, like so. Most of them did. There are versions where it's just almost like a pommel. Still, you know, if you get whacked in the head by the end of one of these, it would hurt quite a lot. I'm just going to use the line tool and add in different facets of the poleaxe. It's either hexagonal or octagonal. It just helps the edge alignment of your blade. Something missed out usually in fantasy stuff. Even with spears may be a octagonal, you know, the shaft anyway. Get rid of these. Okay. Let's say around here we'll have the languettes and a guard for the languettes, and that protect the hand, like a rondel here, and riveted on. And we've got the end of the poleaxe, so I'm going to add in the hammer. Again, notice that this hammer is quite small. It doesn't need to be big. It's got these kind of diamond shaped bits here. If you look up poleaxe, you'll see that. And then the spear tip. And a little few more rivets, like reinforcement rivets. And if you saw this in a fantasy movie and you saw a guy with a poleaxe going up against a guy with a sword, I should imagine the guy with the poleaxe would win. And then let's add in the axe. Terminates here and then goes around like so, and let's add in a little decoration. There we go, we've got our poleaxe. Very deadly. It comes in like that. Let's assume that it's got like a bit of decoration on under here. Okay. Please let me know if I'm getting this wrong. All the guys on the, I suppose some of you from the European 15th century arms and armour group will let me know if I get anything inaccurate here. So you can see a massive difference between each of these characters. Right, let's add in the sword. Imagine in this case the sword would come through here. The end of the pommel there. I'm not going to put in much effort into the sword itself. Let's say there's a little rib there, and it's hidden behind the end. Very expensive, these swords, very expensive. And then let's say it's got the end of the tang there that's peened, and then we've got our maybe let's get some reference on how the belt would have been fitted properly. I do have some. Get rid of the suit of armour. Let's have a look. That's my reference poleaxe. It's not very high. It's not the height of the spear. And that's the end of a poleaxe there, or rundle dagger. That's a form of belt fitting there. Here we go. This is a better look. Okay. See, it dangles. It dangles. It's actually quite fastened quite tightly to the body. So it's at the front now. You can notice how thin this leather strip is compared to the fantasy large modern styled belt. So I've been talking for about 45 minutes nearly now, so let's finish this off. Let's say the belt goes in there and comes down, oops, too far, and then across here. Tiny belt buckle, we don't need it to be big. So it goes over and down. And it's got like a decoration at the end of there. This might be made up a little bit, but much better than what I did with the fantasy guy. Okay. All right. Not really a lot of room for the rondel dagger. I'll just add in one here. Add a little fastening for that as well. Actually, you know what, that would be usually tied on. Let's add a little strip here for that, and the dagger itself will come down here, and then a little decoration for the end of the scabbard. All right. Let's just fill him in. Increase the opacity, and then I'll just erase the underline line work. Pretty much everything but the face, really. And the turn shoes. So let's erase all this. Oh no, I'm getting rid of his beard there. I don't want to do that. Not the beard. Okay. And then let's just leave the shoes. Okay, let's darken down the line work that's underneath, and let's just fill that in. Let me just reiterate the fact that this armor would only weigh between 20 to 30 kilos, so not as heavy as you think it would be. Tournament armor was a lot heavier because it needed to be reinforced for, you know, safety purposes. Field armor was a lot lighter than tournament armor. So we have our rough sketch of our more history based guy. Huge difference between the two, huge. Again, we're going for mercenary, not fully fledged knight. So a knight might have had a different helmet, like an armet or a sallet with a feather. And then he would have had his coat of arms, like a jupon or something like that, which is a gambeson that goes over the top that is very heavily quilted with the coat of arms, gold embroidered and all that special stuff that the knights were could afford. And even this armor here would be quite expensive, but if you're a full-time mercenary, you know, successful in your field, then you could afford this stuff. You need it to survive. Here we go. So I'm now finished. There we go. So massive difference between each other. Huge differences. This armor here, tailored towards the body. This armor here is very you wouldn't be able to move very well. It's very unprotective, these plates here. The sword is too thick. These languettes, you know, it would be harder to actually sheath your weapon properly. The quillons, too thick. Strips, you know, you see this all in fantasy, even in games quite a lot. And you see with the pauldrons here, yes, it's a large pauldron, however, here will not allow any movement of the body, especially the shoulders. Here, you know, it'll still allow plenty of movement. The breastplate is cut in two, so you've got placard and the breastplate itself buckled to each other. In this case, it's long, flat. In this case, dome shaped. It's just I think I've still got some line work that's just coming up here. Let's just add in a medial ridge for this breastplate as well, just quickly. And another huge difference is the fact that this guy here, he's got a helmet on, he's got a poleaxe as his primary weapon, and an arming sword or a long sword as his secondary weapon, and then he's got a rondel dagger in case it gets into a wrestle or a really close fight. Nice protection for the gauntlets and the hands, and he's also got nice protection on the legs. So yeah, I'm going to finish there. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, if you wanted to, you can speed through this, but yeah, this is a bit of a long one. So I hope you really enjoyed that, and I'll catch you on the next one. Maybe it'll be a bit more of a shorter video. Cheers, guys.